Standing there in that glass conference room, watching Preston Caldwell slide a severance envelope across the table like it was some kind of prize, I had exactly 8 minutes to teach him the most expensive lesson of his corporate career. "Congratulations, Mike," he said with that Harvard MBA smirk. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." I looked at the envelope, then at Preston, then at the 20-something faces around the table. Some of them couldn't even look at me. Others were watching like they'd scored front-row seats to a gladiator fight. Austin's tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. Linda's insulin prescription needed refilling next Friday. The mortgage had 12 years and 4 months left on it. Funny how the mind works under pressure. 6 years in the Navy Seabees teaches you that. When mortars start falling, your brain doesn't panic. It calculates. Mission parameters. Available resources. Exit strategies. Restructuring, Preston added, straightening his tie. You know how it is in today's market. Yeah, I knew exactly how it was. I'm Michael Reeves, by the way. Mike to everyone who matters. 45 years old. Spent 6 years in the Navy Seabees building bridges and infrastructure under enemy fire. Then 16 years building something a lot more valuable for Hartwell Dynamics. But let me back up for a second, because this story starts way before this conference room. When I joined Hartwell 16 years ago, we were just another tech startup bleeding money in a shared workspace. Preston had big ideas and bigger promises, but no product. Just whiteboards covered in logistics flowcharts and a business plan that looked good on paper, but couldn't move a single package from point A to point B. That's where I came in, fresh out of the service, looking for a way to use my engineering background in the civilian world. The Navy had taught me how to build systems that work under pressure, real pressure, not the fake pressure of missed quarterly targets. When you're constructing a bridge while taking incoming fire, you learn to build things right the first time. Logistream was my baby from day one. I designed the architecture, wrote the core systems, debugged every problem that would have killed any other startup. For years, Preston praised me in investor meetings. "Mike's the backbone of this operation," he'd say. "Former military, knows how to get things done. Couldn't run this company without him." Investors loved that story. The disciplined veteran building cutting-edge logistics software. It played well in presentations. But about 6 months ago, something shifted. Preston started getting cold in meetings. My access to financial reports quietly disappeared. Conversations stopped whenever I walked into a room. The classic "we don't need the expensive guy anymore" playbook. I'd seen it before in the defense contractors where some of my Navy buddies ended up working. The writing was on the wall when I saw the paperwork last week. A draft contract for Kyle Morrison, 24 years old, fresh out of college. His proposed salary was $65,000. Mine was $180,000. The job description was an exact copy of my responsibilities, just with a few buzzwords changed. That's when I realized Preston wasn't just replacing me. He was trying to erase me. My name was getting scrubbed from patents, press releases, internal documentation. 16 years of building this company from nothing, and they wanted to pretend I'd never existed. But here's what Preston didn't understand about military training. You always prepare for the worst-case scenario. Always have contingencies. Always have an exit strategy. See, Logistream wasn't just logistics software. It was a living, breathing network that I'd architected to be both resilient and highly sensitive to unauthorized control. 6 months ago, when I started seeing the signs, I embedded something, not malicious, that's not how we operated in the service, but protective, a fail-safe protocol. If certain credentials got revoked, mine specifically, the system would assume hostile takeover and initiate automatic lockdown, not destruction. Not data loss, just offline. Everything. Servers, APIs, client interfaces, the whole infrastructure. Dead as a doornail until proper authorization could be re-established. I stood up slow, unclipped my badge, and set it down gentle on that polished glass table. Around me, I could hear the subtle shift in breathing patterns. Tension rising. Target acquired. "Preston," I said, letting the silence hang for a beat. "I suggest you pull up the Logistream monitoring dashboard. You're going to want to see the countdown that just started." The room went dead quiet. "Excuse me?" Preston blinked. I smiled, not the friendly kind. The kind you give when you know exactly how the next 8 minutes are going to play out. Check your system status. "Mission clock is running." Someone opened their laptop. Someone else bolted for the door. Sarah Martinez, our operations director and former Navy logistics officer, went wide-eyed. She knew that look. She'd seen it before in theater when things were about to get interesting. That's when the panic started. Preston's fake confidence melted like ice in the desert. He jumped up so fast his chair rolled backward. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Just straightened my jacket, picked up the little cardboard box they'd so thoughtfully provided for my personal effects, and headed for the door. Inside the box were a few family photos, my Navy coffee mug, and a small American flag Austin had given me for Father's Day when he was 8. As I reached the doorway, I glanced back. Brad Stone, our CTO, was typing like his life depended on it. 2 engineers were sprinting toward the server room. Preston was jabbing at his phone, probably calling someone who might know how to fix this mess. 7 minutes now, I said quietly, then stepped into the hallway. The elevator arrived just as my phone started buzzing. 7 missed calls already, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I stepped in, hit the parking garage button, and watched the countdown on my phone. 4:32 remaining. Right on schedule, Logistream went dark. Not just the internal systems, not just the test servers. The entire production network collapsed. Global clients offline. Shipment tracking gone. Warehouse integrations dead. Hartwell Dynamics, the supposed leader in supply chain technology, just became a $480 million paperweight. I could picture Preston staring at his screen as error messages multiplied like wildfire. Engineers scrambling to reboot servers only to realize nothing was coming back online. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a number I recognized. Sarah, probably the only person in that building who understood what just happened and why. I let it ring. Not yet. Let them understand the scope of their problem first. Let them realize that the guy they thought was just another employee actually held the keys to everything they'd built, or thought they'd built. Because the truth was, they hadn't built anything. I had. And now they were about to learn the difference between owning a company and running one. I drove home the long way. No rush. Even stopped at the Starbucks on Maple Street, the one where Linda gets her morning coffee before her shift at the clinic. The barista, Jessica, asked how my day went. Interesting, I told her. Might be changing careers soon. She laughed, thinking I was joking. If only she knew the chaos unfolding 5 miles away was my doing. Well, technically it was their doing. I just built the consequences into the system. The house was quiet when I walked in. Linda was at her book club, Thursday nights with the other Navy wives, discussing whatever novel they'd picked this month. Austin was upstairs studying for his SATs. Emma had cheerleading practice until 6. Normal family life. The kind I'd been working 16 years to protect. By the time I set my keys down, my phone was going crazy. 15 missed calls from Preston. 8 from Sarah. 4 from Brad. Text messages flooding in from numbers I didn't recognize. System down. Client screaming, "Need you back now." I powered down the phone, ordered Thai food from that place Austin likes, and turned on the History Channel. Some documentary about D-Day logistics. Appropriate. Around 5:30, Austin came downstairs. Kid's built like his old man, but got his mother's brains. Plans to study mechanical engineering at State, assuming we can swing the tuition. "Dad, you're home early," he said, grabbing a Coke from the fridge. "Yeah, had some interesting developments at work today." He gave me that look kids give when they're trying to figure out if their parents are having a midlife crisis. "Everything okay? You seem, I don't know, different." Smart kid. "Everything's fine, son. Actually, might be better than fine soon." "How's the scholarship application coming?" "Good, got the essay done. Wrote about leadership and doing what's right even when it's hard." I smiled. "That's my boy." "Where'd you learn about that?" "From you, Dad. That story you told me about building the bridge in Afghanistan while taking mortar fire. How you kept the team focused on the mission even when everything was falling apart." The kid got it. Honor, duty, mission first. Values that seem to be in short supply in corporate America these days. At 6:15 there was a knock. Deliberate, professional. I checked the peephole. Sarah Martinez and Brad Stone, both looking like they'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. I opened the door slow, just wide enough to read their faces. "Well, this is unexpected." "Social call?" Sarah's expression was tight, controlled. Classic Navy. Keep your emotions in check. Focus on the problem. "Mike, we need to talk." "It's urgent. Seems sudden." "Last I checked, my employment was terminated as of 4:30 this afternoon." Brad stepped forward. Former Army Signal Corps, but he'd gone soft in corporate life. "Look, there's been a serious misunderstanding." I laughed, couldn't help it. "A misunderstanding? Which part? The public humiliation, the severance envelope, or Preston trying to replace me with a college kid making 1/3 of my salary?" Sarah winced. She knew. Of course she knew. "Can we come in? Please, this affects everyone." I considered it. In the Navy, when someone comes to your position asking for help, you listen. Even if they're not in your chain of command. Shoes off, they shuffled in like junior officers reporting to a commanding officer. I gestured to the living room. "Have a seat." Austin peeked around the corner from the kitchen. I caught his eye. Why don't you go upstairs, finish that physics homework? He nodded, understanding the tone. When Dad uses that voice, you follow orders. I sat across from them, hands clasped, waiting. In negotiations, first person to speak usually loses. Another thing the military teaches you? Brad cracked first. Look, the system, Logistream, it's completely offline. Everything. Production, development, client portals. We can't even send status updates. Catastrophic failure, I said, finishing for him. Full stack lockdown. Every client offline. Stock price probably in free fall. Media starting to circle like vultures. CEC probably getting the phone calls. Am I tracking this correctly? Sarah leaned forward. Mike, I ran the numbers. We're looking at breach of service agreements with 90% of our clients. Legal is saying 24 lawsuits minimum by morning. The board's in emergency session. Sounds rough, I said. Brad rubbed his neck, nervous habit from his army days. This could kill the company. Destroy everything we've built. Thousands of jobs. Everything we've built? I tilted my head. Interesting choice of words, Brad. Remind me, who wrote the core Logistream architecture? He swallowed hard. You did. And who designed the integration protocols that handle 90% of our client traffic? You. And who spent the last 6 months getting cut out of strategic decisions while Preston tried to replace me with someone who doesn't know the difference between a database and a spreadsheet? Sarah jumped in. Look, Mike, we know this was handled wrong. Preston was impulsive. But this can be fixed. You can fix it. I stood up, walked to the window. Through the glass, I could see Mrs. Henderson watering her garden next door. Retired teacher, lost her husband last year. Still waves every morning when I leave for work. This neighborhood, this life, it took 16 years of 12-hour days and missed family dinners to build. Can I asked, turning back to them. You have to, Brad said, desperation creeping into his voice. The fail-safe protocol, I remember you mentioning it during system reviews. Something about unauthorized access triggering defensive measures. I smiled. You were paying attention after all. Yeah, it's a feature I built 6 years ago. Standard security protocol. When my credentials got revoked, the system assumed hostile takeover and protected itself. Sarah's military training kicked in. She was putting the pieces together. So you still have access? Of course I do. I built the back door the same year I put in the fail-safe. Figured if someone ever tried to lock me out of my own system, I might need a way back in. I walked to my laptop, opened it, typed a few keys. The Logistream dashboard loaded. All red alerts, critical failures, system integrity compromised. Brad leaned forward, eyes wide. The whole network's down. Client data's isolated but intact. It's like the system is hibernating. That's exactly what it's doing, I said, turning the screen toward them. Protecting itself until proper authority can be reestablished. Sarah met my eyes. And what constitutes proper authority? I closed the laptop. That depends. I walked back to the window. Through the reflection, I could see them both waiting. Two decent people caught in the middle of Preston's corporate stupidity. Sarah had served her country with honor before joining Hartwell. Brad had done his time in Signal Corps, understood what it meant to keep critical systems running. But they'd also sat in that conference room and watched Preston humiliate me. Nobody spoke up. Nobody questioned the decision. Depends on what? Sarah pressed. I turned back to face them. On whether this company is ready to acknowledge what it almost threw away, and whether it's willing to pay the price to get it back. Brad blinked. You're talking about terms. I'm talking about respect, I said. Something that seems to be in short supply around here lately. Sarah pulled out her phone. Preston needs to hear this. I shook my head. Number. Preston needs to come here. He wants his system back. He can ask for it properly. On my turf, my terms. Mike, Brad started. He's not going to. He will, I interrupted. Because right about now, his phone's ringing off the hook with very angry investors, asking very pointed questions about why their $400 million investment just went dark. Sarah was already dialing. Through the phone, I could hear it ringing and ringing. When Preston finally picked up, his voice was strained, desperate. Even from across the room, I could hear the panic. Sarah, thank God. Is he there? Can he fix it? Sarah looked at me. I nodded. He's here, she said. But Preston, you need to come over, now, and bring your checkbook. 20 minutes later, the sound of screeching tires echoed from my driveway. Through the window, I watched Preston's black BMW take the turn too fast, nearly clipping Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. The man was unraveling. Sarah and Brad had spent the last 15 minutes fielding calls on their phones. The scope of the disaster was becoming clear. Hartwell's biggest client, Transglobal Shipping, was already threatening to pull their contract. The European division had gone dark completely. Someone from the Wall Street Journal was asking questions. The knock came fast and angry, 3 sharp bangs that rattled the front door. I let it sit. Military discipline. Control the tempo, control the engagement. Another round of knocking, more desperate this time. I opened the door just wide enough to see Preston Caldwell standing there looking like he'd been dragged through a corporate shredder. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. The confident CEO who'd smirked while firing me 6 hours ago now looked like a man watching his empire crumble in real time. "Fix it," he said, trying to push past me. "Fix it now." I didn't move. Just stood there blocking the doorway. "Evening, Preston. Rough day at the office?" His face went red. "Don't play games with me, Mike. Turn the system back on." "You seem upset," I said, stepping aside slowly. "Come on in, let's talk about it." He stormed into my living room like he owned the place. Sarah and Brad stood up from the couch, uncomfortable. They knew what was coming. Preston spun toward me, eyes wild. "This is sabotage. Criminal destruction of property. I'll have the FBI here within the hour." "Careful," I said, voice calm and measured. "You're about to make accusations you can't take back. In front of witnesses." He stopped, jaw clenched, breathing heavy. But behind all that bluster, I could see it. Real fear. The kind that comes when you realize you're in over your head. "Preston," I said, walking to my laptop. "Let me show you something." I opened the Logistream dashboard and turned it toward him. The disaster lit up his face like a Christmas tree. Client operations, 94% offline. Service level breaches, 156 and climbing. Pending legal actions, 31. Emergency board calls, 7. "This look familiar?" I asked. His fists clenched. "You did this. You sabotaged our system." Sarah stepped forward. "Actually, Preston, the logs show you revoked Mike's credentials at 4:32 this afternoon. The system lockdown was an automatic response to unauthorized access attempts." Brad nodded, pulling up his own laptop. "Here's the audit trail. When Mike's admin privileges were terminated, the security protocol triggered a protective shutdown. It's all documented." Preston's face drained of color. "What security protocol?" I smiled. "The one I implemented 6 years ago and briefed you on in the quarterly security reviews. The ones you never attended because you were too busy playing golf with investors." "That's..." he started, then stopped. Because he knew. Deep down he knew I was right. I walked to my desk, pulled out a thick folder. Paper records. Old school. "While we're being honest, Preston, let's talk about what else the system's been tracking." I opened the folder and spread the documents across my coffee table. Access logs, file modification records, late-night login attempts. 6 months of unauthorized access to Logistream's core repository, I said. Attempts to copy proprietary code. Downloads of sensitive architecture documents, all traced back to your personal login credentials. Sarah leaned forward, scanning the documents. "Preston, this shows you trying to clone the entire code base to an external drive." "It's not what it looks like," he said weakly. "Really?" I pulled out another document. "Because this email to your buddy at Meridian Capital suggests otherwise." Quote, "Working on extracting key personnel dependencies from Logistream architecture. Timeline for transition still on track." Brad went pale. "You were planning this for months." Preston slumped into my armchair looking defeated. "The board was asking questions. Investors wanted to see cost savings. Your salary was..." "My salary was earned," I interrupted. "Every dollar of it. While you were schmoozing investors, I was building the system that made this company worth $400 million. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. I walked back to the window. Outside, I could see Emma's headlights pulling into the driveway. Cheerleading practice was over. In a few minutes, she'd walk through that door, probably complaining about algebra homework or asking if I could help her with her college application essays. Normal family life. The life I'd spent 16 years building. "What I want," I said, turning back to face them, "is acknowledgement, respect, and compensation for what you tried to steal." Preston looked up. "How much?" 25% ownership of Logistream patents. $7 million in personal compensation for attempted IP theft. Reinstatement as CTO with a permanent board seat. And a public statement acknowledging my role as the system's architect. His mouth fell open. That's insane. 25%? 25% of something is better than 100% of nothing," Sarah said quietly, "which is what we'll have if the system stays down much longer." Brad was doing math on his phone. "Preston, Transglobal alone represents $60 million in annual revenue. If they walk," and they will walk, I added. "Their CTO called me directly an hour ago, offered me a job. Seems they'd rather have the guy who built the system than the company that fired him." Preston's hands were shaking now. $7 million. We don't have that kind of cash on hand." "You'll find it," I said. "Liquidate some of your stock options. Take a loan against company assets. Get creative. You seemed pretty creative when you were trying to replace me with a college graduate making $65,000. Emma walked through the front door, backpack slung over her shoulder. Dad, I'm home. Oh, sorry, didn't know you had company. Just finishing up some business, sweetheart. How was practice? Good, coach says I might make varsity next year. She looked around at the tense faces. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Why don't you grab some dinner from the kitchen? Thai food's still warm. She nodded and headed upstairs, but not before giving Preston a curious look. Smart kid. Could sense the tension in the room. That's my daughter, I said after she was gone. 16 years old. Honor roll student. Wants to study computer science in college. Looks up to her dad because she thinks he's a man of integrity. I let that hang in the air for a moment. I'd like to keep it that way, I continued, which means this gets resolved quietly, professionally, and fairly. No lawyers, no FBI, no media circus. Just a straightforward business transaction between adults. Preston was quiet for a long moment. Then, if I agree to this, you restore the system immediately? Within the hour. Full functionality, all clients back online, no data loss. And no more surprises? No more hidden protocols? I shook my head. Clean slate, new partnership. But Preston, I leaned forward. If you ever try something like this again, if you ever attempt to undermine me or steal my work, the next shutdown won't be temporary. He swallowed hard. How do I know you'll keep your word? Sarah spoke up. Because unlike you, Mike has honor. Military honor. When he gives his word, it means something. Preston looked around the room, at Sarah's disappointed face, at Brad's nervous expression, at the document spread across my coffee table proving his attempted theft. Fine, he said finally. Draft the agreement. I smiled. Already done. I pulled a contract from the folder. Standard partnership agreement. 25% ownership, $7 million compensation, CTO reinstatement, board seat, public acknowledgement. All it needs is your signature. His hands trembled as he picked up the pen. For a moment, I thought he might throw it across the room, but he didn't. He signed. Slowly, deliberately, like a man signing his own surrender. When he finished, he shoved the papers back at me. It's done. I looked at the signature, then at him. No, Preston, now we're partners. And partners don't try to steal from each other. The next morning, I didn't walk into Hartwell Dynamics as an employee. I walked in as a 25% owner with a permanent seat on the board of directors. The difference was immediately obvious. Conversations didn't stop when I entered rooms. People looked me in the eye. The junior developers who used to avoid me were suddenly very interested in discussing technical architecture. Word travels fast in corporate America, especially when the guy you thought was finished becomes your boss overnight. The first board meeting as a partner was something else. I walked into that conference room like I owned a piece of it, which, legally speaking, I did. 25% ownership carries weight. The kind of weight that makes people listen when you talk. Preston sat at the head of the table trying to maintain some semblance of authority. But everyone could see the shift. The other board members, Whitaker from the financial side, Rodriguez from operations, Thompson from legal, they were looking at me differently now. Not as an employee they could dismiss, but as an equal they had to respect. Per yesterday's agreement, I said, laying the signed contract on the table, Logistream is fully operational. All clients restored, system integrity confirmed, service level agreements back in compliance. Whitaker leaned forward. What about the client retention situation? Transglobal stayed. So did the European accounts. Most of them, anyway. Turns out when you explain that the outage was actually a security feature protecting their data from unauthorized access, they appreciate the technical sophistication. Rodriguez smiled slightly. And the media attention? TechCrunch ran a piece about innovative cybersecurity protocols. Wall Street Journal called it advanced threat protection. Sometimes a crisis becomes a marketing opportunity if you frame it right. Preston's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue with results. Now, I continued, let's talk about moving forward. I've identified some operational improvements that could increase efficiency by 15% within 6 months. For the next hour, we discuss technical upgrades, client expansion strategies, and competitive positioning. Real business. The kind Preston should have been focusing on instead of trying to replace his chief engineer with a college kid. The meeting ended with handshakes and strategic planning sessions scheduled for next week. As everyone filed out, Preston lingered behind. Mike, he said quietly. About yesterday. I held up a hand. Yesterday's over, Preston. We're partners now. That means we work together or we don't work at all. He nodded, looking older somehow. Right, partners. I was packing up my notes when Sarah approached. Got a minute? We walked to her office. She closed the door and turned to face me. That was well played, she said. The whole thing. Military precision. Thanks. Though I have to ask, why didn't anyone speak up yesterday? In the conference room when Preston fired me? She sighed. Honestly? Because we thought you'd land on your feet. Your reputation in the industry, your skill set, we figured you'd have job offers within a week. And the company? We figured Preston knew what he was doing. That maybe he had a transition plan we weren't seeing. She shook her head. We were wrong. All of us. I appreciated the honesty. In the military, you own your mistakes. Corporate America could learn something from that. What now, she asked. Now we build something better. No more back-channel politics. No more keeping key personnel out of strategic decisions. We run this company like professionals. She smiled. I can work with that. I left the office that afternoon feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Optimism. Real optimism about the future of Hartwell Dynamics and my place in it. At home, Linda was waiting with coffee and questions. So, she said, curling up next to me on the couch. Want to tell me why Austin's been grinning all day and Emma keeps asking if we're rich now? I laughed. Word travels fast in this house. Your son is proud of you. Says you stood up to corporate corruption and won. His words. Smart kid. He gets that from his father. She paused. The diabetes medication I need. The expensive kind my insurance only partially covers. Fully covered now. Executive health plan. And Austin's tuition? State school, 4 years, room and board. We can handle it without loans. And Emma's college fund? Started and funded. She can study wherever she wants. Linda was quiet for a moment. You know, when you came home yesterday and said you might be getting a promotion, I thought you were being sarcastic. Nope. Just confident in my contingency planning. She kissed my cheek. I'm proud of you. Not for the money or the title, but for standing up for yourself. For showing our kids that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. That evening, Austin knocked on my home office door. He was holding a college brochure. Dad, I've been thinking about that engineering program at State. Yeah? What about it? Maybe I want to study cybersecurity instead. You know, build systems that protect important stuff. I smiled. That's good work, son. Honest work. Someone's got to keep the bad guys out. Did you always know? Yesterday, I mean. Did you know it would work out? I leaned back in my chair thinking about it. In the Navy, we had a saying. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. I spent 6 months preparing for the possibility that Preston would try something like this. I just hoped I'd never have to use it. But you were ready. Always be ready, Austin. In business, in life, in everything. Build your skills, know your worth, and never let anyone convince you you're disposable. He nodded seriously. Got it. Hey, Dad? Yeah? Think you could teach me some of that system architecture stuff? For when I get to college. I'd be honored. A few days later, I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but not blocked this time. Mike Reeves. Mr. Reeves, this is Troy Aldridge from Meridian Capital Group. I sat up straighter. What can I do for you, Troy? I understand congratulations are in order. Partnership in Hartwell Dynamics. Substantial equity position in Logistream. Impressive negotiation. Thanks. Though I don't recall asking for your opinion. A slight pause. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Meridian is always interested in strategic partnerships with innovative companies. Is that so? Last time we talked, you seemed more interested in hostile acquisition. Misunderstanding. We prefer collaborative approaches when possible. I smiled. Funny thing about collaboration, Troy. It works best when everyone comes to the table honestly. From what I understand, your collaborative approach with Preston involved months of behind-the-scenes planning and attempted IP theft. Silence on the other end. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Meridian is going to find other investment opportunities. Hartwell Dynamics is off limits. Logistream is off limits. Any attempt to interfere with our operations, our personnel, or our intellectual property will result in very public, very expensive legal consequences. Mr. Reeves, I think you may be overestimating your position. Troy, I think you may be underestimating what happens when you threaten a system builder who's already proven he can shut down a $400 million company with a few keystrokes. Another pause, longer this time. Understood, he said finally. No further contact. Smart man. Have a good day, Troy. I hung up and went back to my quarterly reports. Some problems solve themselves when you make your position clear from the start. 6 months later, Hartwell Dynamics posted record profits. Logistream had expanded into 3 new markets. Austin got into State with a partial scholarship. His essay about integrity and standing up to corporate pressure apparently impressed the admissions committee. Emma made varsity cheerleading and decided she wants to study business and computer science. Preston's still CEO, but he's different now. More collaborative, more respectful. Turns out being a partner forces you to think long-term instead of just quarterly targets. Some evenings I sit on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset over the neighborhood Linda and I built our life in. The mortgage is paid off. The kids' college funds are secure. Linda's medications are covered. But mostly I'm proud that my kids learned something important. That competence matters, that integrity isn't negotiable, and that sometimes the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. They tried to erase me from the company I built. Instead, they taught me exactly how much I was worth. And that lesson was worth every penny of those $7 million sitting in my retirement account.